author Sarah A. Chrisman.
I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're talking about the Salisbury House and Gardens. Now, Iowa's got quite a few house museums sprinkled throughout the state. Our capital city of Des Moines has two really big ones. There is the Governor's Mansion.
Terrace Hill,
which is gorgeous.
It was built in the 1860s.
Right. And there is Salisbury House. And this one is really interesting. Now this one, it took us a little while to get to visit Salisbury House because...
Yeah, it had been built in the 1920s, and so we thought, oh, this is a little bit after our period.
Right, and also the marketing that's done of it these days, they tend to market it as a venue for big events and weddings. And we were already married, and we weren't, going to throw any big events. And because we'd always seen marketing for it, advertising it as a venue, we didn't quite understand what a cool museum it also is.
Right.
But this year, earlier on in the year, for my birthday, I said, I think it's time to go visit the Salisbury House Museum. Just see what it's like. Because even though we'd always heard it advertised as, a wedding venue, it's a historic building, and we're interested in historic buildings. So we went, and I'm really, really glad we did, because there is so much more to it than just being a venue. It's really selling it short to only advertise it.
Yeah.
I understand that's where the money is, but...
Right. It's fascinating, though, and it made me think of the way that we do things and approach things, because this was a couple who really built a house that showcased all of their interests.
Right. So this couple, the man was a cosmetics magnate in the early 20th century, which is different. We've been to a lot of house museums. We've been to the Pabst Museum in Milwaukee, which is a beer magnate.
We've been to Crag de Rock.
He was a coal magnate.
Yep.
We've been to the Flavel House, which, depending on when we visited it, at first they were calling it the Flavel House, then they called it the Flavel House, so they changed their pronunciation over the years.
But he was shipping and pilotage.
He was a pilot on the Columbia River. So we've been to a lot of different house museums. This was the first cosmetic magnate's house we'd visited, which was fun because we didn't really know as much about the cosmetics industry because it's not our interest per se. I don't wear cosmetics, but it was really fascinating to see his house. And he was a cosmetics magnate in the early 20th century, so he made a lot of money selling cosmetics. And this house was what he put that money into.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah.
And then some.
Right.
And he had an interest in history, and he and his wife had made a trip over to England, and they had seen what was essentially a royal palace that was being remodeled.
An English manor.
It was an English manor, but it had been used as a residence for the royal family.
Right, right.
And they were remodeling it, of course. This was the 1920s. And they were modernizing things, and he was able to basically buy all of the woodwork and all of the decorative stuff that they were tearing out. And so he used all of that in this house. And he also copied the general style and layout of the house from that royal residence in England.
Right. And his wife had a college degree in fine arts. So it was really interesting to me to compare this house museum in Des Moines with another Iowa house museum that we really adore. That's the Porterhouse Museum. Which city is that one in? Decorah. And the Porterhouse Museum is just this wonderful little gem of a place. If you ever come to Iowa, if you have any interest at all, you really must see the Porterhouse Museum. It is beautiful.
And this is kind of similar.
Right,
in many ways.
With a difference. So the difference that I saw, the Porterhouse Museum, both of those folks, they were self-made amateur experts, I would call them, of everything. So he was...
We're talking now about the Porters.
Yeah, this is the Porters. And I think of him as being a lot like Bumps in my Chetzemoka series, because he was a self-made scientist, effectively. He taught himself everything he knew, and his whole house is chock-a-block full of butterflies. These are all the butterflies he has collected on all of these, intense scientific expeditions
in South America
through the Amazon, and hunting butterflies, which is undeniably cool.
Yes.
And his wife painted china. She painted ceramic dinnerware. And so all of her hand-painted dinnerware is there as well. Now, she was also self-taught. Difference between the Porters and the Salisburys, Mrs. Salisbury was very much the college-educated woman.
Yes.
College-educated in fine arts. She appreciated fine arts. She was very much a patron of the arts. She bought a lot.
Yes.
She didn't actually make any art.
Right.
And that, to me, is the difference. Because that's the big place where these folks diverge from us. They had the money to just buy everything they wanted. Whereas I think we're more like the Porters, where we actually, because we don't have the sort of money the Salisburys had, we actually have to do it all ourselves.
Right. But both of them, and we also, like to surround ourselves with the things that we enjoy, that fascinate us, and we invest a lot of time and effort and energy in creating this whole sort of place to live within all of our interests.
Right. A friend of mine, when she first met me, she looked around at all of the stenciling and the painting I'd been doing in our house, and she said, "Oh, you love painting." I said, "No, actually, I hate painting, but I love living in a beautiful place. I love living in a beautiful setting. And so even though I hate painting, the work of painting is the price I'm willing to pay to live in a beautiful setting, because I can't afford to pay someone else to do it, but I'm willing to do it myself."
Right.
And
And, the interest in history, too. And their interest in history was, at the same time, both specific and eclectic.
yeah, which
is
I
a little
liked
bit
that
like
about
us.
them.
Exactly.
Very true. I liked that about the Salisburys.
They had this focus on the sort of Tudor history. And they had, a lot of material in this house that was either real Tudor artifacts or were sort of well-made copies of those.
Right, and that was especially her focus. His focus was more so on the really long history. He was into geology.
Yes.
And
which is also similar to the Porter House folks.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And something not everyone knows about Iowa. The folks who live here know this about Iowa, but people from elsewhere might not know it. Iowa has a lot of really rich geology, actually. There's a lot of rich prehistory in Iowa. And so he went all around the state especially collecting geodes.
Which is the state rock.
The geode is now the state rock. And so when you
can't even tell by looking at the face of this, but actually because it's a black and white image, but the entire face of the entryway of this mansion is set with geodes.
Yeah, which he collected.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
it's this whole wall of glittering crystals. It's gorgeous.
And I expected to see a traditional sort of limestone facing, and seeing it as all geodes with a few bits of limestone in between was really interesting and different. And again, that's what I mean by saying they really love the history, but they also infused this sort of eclecticism, which to me was very familiar, because it is kind of the way we do things. Right.
And they had the money to do things like deconstruct entire rooms and entire walls that were being taken down in England and ship them over. But then in places where, say, a brick had fallen out or a stone had fallen out, he would replace that, instead of just with another brick, he would replace it with a geode, or there was a rock from the Parthenon.
Yes. There was a chunk from the stone, the Rock of Gibraltar.
Right.
There was a lot of stuff from all around the world that just represented things that fascinated him.
Right. And again, I wish we had their money.
Right, yes.
But it doesn't just take money to do something like that. To do it that way, he had to have that real passion for history, and that was where we felt connection, was that passion for history.
Right.
We don't have the sort of money they had to,
and the passion for beauty, and wanting to surround yourself with interesting and beautiful things.
Exactly.
And have them built into the very walls that surround you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And part of the long story of the Salisburys is that they, like many people who were the original builders and owners of what later became house museums, they overspent themselves.
Yes, and it didn't help that they completed this in the late 1920s, and then, of course, everything went straight into the Depression.
Right.
This did not help.
It also didn't help that a member of their family was involved and at fault in a very costly auto accident.
Right, so there was also just lawsuits and expenditures that were not anticipated along those lines.
Right. So what they wound up doing was financially very clever. They wound up signing over the building to, was it the Iowa State Education Association?
I don't remember the exact group, but it was an educational nonprofit.
Yeah, it was an educational nonprofit. But they still got to live there. That was the deal.
Part of the contract.
Yeah, that was part of the contract. That the Educational Association would own the building, but they still got to live there for minimal rent. Yeah, which was important to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they did, unlike a lot of people who overspent themselves building big fancy houses, they did get to live there, which is, a plus for them.
Yeah, though it must have been a little bittersweet knowing they didn't really control it anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was something I did notice as we were walking around in there. I was disappointed that the original kitchen was long gone.
That was terrible. It's a lot of these things that got turned into an educational institution or that got turned into a B&B or whatever else these beautiful houses got turned into. The kitchen was often the first casualty because of a variety of terrible, meaningless regulations to do with codes to do with. Like, I guarantee you that amazing gas stove that they had would have been perfectly safe to cook on.
Well, I guarantee you it would have been better to cook on than whatever, institutionally approved thing was required by code.
Right. And it just was terrible that they tore out so many of these and that they don't survive for us to look at.
Right.
I was so glad in the Pabst House that they still had the refrigeration system still operating.
The Pabst House kitchen was incredible.
Yes. And so that was one of the very few that seems to have survived.
But
the vast majority of other house museums, it's gone.
If you're ever in Milwaukee, go to the Pabst House Museum because and especially see the kitchen.
Yes.
That kitchen is amazing.
It is epic.
And the amount of ice they went through to keep those coolers going is rather astonishing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was the only place I've ever seen. I'd seen pie safes before, the classic shelf where you put the pie behind a screen. The Pabst Mansion was the only place I have ever seen a walk-in pie safe.
Right, yes.
But back to the Salisbury house.
Yeah.
Another thing this had in common for me with the Porterhouse Museum, I looked at this house, I walked through this house, and I saw it as a house that love built.
Yes.
Which I just...
Absolutely. And I mean, the distinctiveness of the bedrooms and the dressing rooms and the bathrooms even, the care and the intention that went into the design and the idea and even just the placement, it was clearly a house that they really loved and that they really built exactly the way they wanted it.
Yeah.
And that, to us, is just really inspiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's definitely one of Iowa's gems that you may not have heard of if you haven't been to the state of Iowa. I'm sure all the Iowans know it. I'm sure most of the Iowans actually that are watching this have been there probably multiple times.
Probably, yeah.
But if you're not from Iowa, you may not have heard of it. And it's definitely worth a visit.
Absolutely.
So, highly recommend it. Thanks for watching today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!